Hi, I'm Steve from the Rooted Podcast, and I hope you can join me every weekday for a 5-minute or less devotional word study or insight into Scripture to add to your day. Welcome to Fruit Snacks. Hey everyone, in today's Bible background episode, I'd like to talk about the Old Testament concept of a kinsman redeemer and discuss in a little more detail what exactly a kinsman redeemer was and what he was responsible for, because there's a very interesting and frankly cool New Testament tie-in to how it affects all of us as modern day Christians. So what was a kinsman redeemer? Well, in a nutshell, the idea of a kinsman redeemer was simply a male relative within a family structure in ancient Near Eastern times who would, if needed, step in on behalf of another family member, basically to have their back, to step in and defend or vindicate or help in time of need. Now, we often think about a kinsman redeemer only in terms of marrying the wife of a dead brother or dead close male relative, like in the story of Ruth and Boaz. But that's not the only role that a kinsman redeemer had. In fact, there were all kinds of other ways that a redeemer could step in and help out his family. That could be through financial means. It could be buying up a piece of family land that a poorer relative couldn't afford to do, and so securing the legacy and the inheritance of that relative for them. Because we have to remember that in ancient times, land ownership and the ability to work the land, to make a living from the land were basically everything to a family. If you didn't have that, you really had very limited options for how you could provide for yourself and for your family. And in the case of Ruth and Boaz, for Ruth, as a woman in the society and time in which she lived, as a widow, she really didn't have any options for providing for herself. It's not like she could have just gone and gotten a job for herself. And so, given that social constraint, someone like Boaz, this kinsman redeemer, was necessary to ensure that Ruth and widows like Ruth in that day and age didn't fall into poverty and ultimately starve or have to resort to begging or even prostitution in order to make ends meet. Now, in the New Testament, this idea gets carried forward because this whole concept of someone coming along on behalf of someone who is in desperate need and stepping in to vindicate them, to defend them, to stand up for them, and to help them is directly applicable to Jesus Christ. Because as New Testament Christians, we believe that this is exactly what Jesus has done. And the whole concept of God being our ultimate redeemer is actually something that you see traced all throughout Scripture, way back into books like Job and the Psalms, where God himself acts as the redeemer. And so in the New Testament, this concept gets further distilled within the person of Jesus, but it's a neat theme to trace through Scripture to see that at various times and in various ways, God has always been acting on behalf of his people to step in on their behalf with a desire to vindicate, to defend, and to help, and to save. And he instituted this idea of kinsman redeemers within his people, Israel, in the Old Testament as a way of alluding to or echoing this idea of the ultimate redeemer, who is Jesus.